President-elect Trump promising to make mass deportations a key part of his second term. Incoming border czar Tom Homan telling Fox Business Live about the price tag of these plans.
Congress needs to fund this deportation operation. It's going to be expensive, and everybody's focused on how expensive it's going to be. They need to understand, yeah, it's going to be expensive in the beginning, but in the long run, it's going to save billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. We are talking about the biggest national security vulnerability this country has. $86 billion is a start. We need at least that to do this operation.
Joining me now is Texas Department of Public Safety Lieutenant Christopher Olivarez. Lieutenant, I want to get your reaction to Tom Homan's most recent comments.
Hey, Cheryl, good morning. So, of course, what Tom Homan mentioned, it is going to be very costly, right, to have this massive deportation operation. But I think if we look back the last 4 years, how much money has been spent on illegal immigration, it's been in the billions, and that's on the taxpayer. So I think if we really look at the interests of the country, the safety and security of the country, right now, having this removal operation is really going to be proven to be effective. Now, again, as Tom mentioned, in the long run, it will save taxpayer money because now they won't have to fund the custody and care of illegal immigrants that are in the country right now, especially in some of these states. So I think moving forward, this is something that we do need to really look at. And of course, as you mentioned, Congress does need to get involved and fund this operation and really look at what really outweighs the cost or outweighs the risk is really having and removing criminals that are in the country right now or have been convicted of crimes. That should be the priority for anybody right now.
But the question mark on that is the local level officials in these sanctuary cities. In particular, the New York Times points this out this morning. They talk about the fact that many local officials across the country are trying to figure out their role in immigration, and it's to fight back against Tom Homan, fight back against what the voters asked for, which was immigration. But, they talk about San Diego region, and they say that, even though you saw a drop there, but that, the sheriff is vowing he's going to defy protecting migrants. He says that's one side of it. But then you've also got other, officials in Chicago and New York that are trying to figure out ways to protect immigrants. So maybe in San Diego, the sheriff says, I'm going to work with ICE. I'm going to get these criminals out of the country. But in other cities, it's a different story.
This is going to take a unified partnership with everybody. Every elected official should get on board with this. Again, one thing that incoming border czar Tom Homan has mentioned and has stressed is that the fact that they're looking at the prioritization of criminals that are in the country right now, criminal gangs, those that have been convicted of crimes, those that have actually seen a judge, an asylum judge, that have been adjudicated. They already received due process, and they have orders of removal. They need to be removed. I don't see how anyone, and again, I say this so many times already, how anyone, any elected official, law enforcement official would be against removing any type of public safety threat in their state. So I think everyone that's vowing to defy, to cooperate with the federal government and the new administration's policies moving forward is really putting their states in danger. Look at what happened most recently in New York in the subway. That right there is a census act that should have been prevented, could have been prevented. That was a getaway that was in the country illegally. Think about how many more in the country right now that could possibly commit crimes, and we won't know about it until they actually commit these heinous crimes.
You're talking about the Guatemalan immigrant that set a woman on fire on the New York City subway.
Yes.
And then watched. She was sleeping. He sets her on fire in the subway. But he had been deported under Trump. And we are showing that video, folks, and it's graphic, and I know it's early in the morning. But, an ICE spokesperson says that suspect was caught at the Arizona border in 2018, deported, and then sneaks back into the country at an unknown date, and here we go. Sebastian Cepeda now charged, by the way, just to add some context for our viewers, first and second degree murder and first degree arson. He's accused, of course, of lighting her clothes on fire and then sitting her and watching her burn. He says he has no memory, by the way, Lieutenant. He apparently was using K2 every day and then drinking and was going nuts about it. But pivoting back to, and I'm glad you mentioned this, the horrific incident here. But pivoting back to my point about San Diego, just one example, is because the board of supervisors in San Diego says that they're figuring out how to protect the migrants, and the sheriff is saying, I'm going to defy those orders. Are we going to get more stories like that of hero officers, whether it's a sheriff or a police sergeant, that's going to say, you know what, I am going to work with ICE because I'm tired of dealing with these illegal criminals in my city, in my state?
Oh, I do believe so. I think you're going to have more law enforcement now actually being outspoken about this issue. The fact that, we're starting to see some of this crime that's taking place throughout the country, some of these horrific crimes that have been perpetrated by illegal immigrants that should not be in the country. We're not talking about your everyday person that's been here for years, that's trying to make a living for their families. We're talking about criminals that have committed crimes, criminals that have snuck into the country, that have criminal backgrounds, that have been through the jail process, that have already been received due process. That's what we're talking about. We want to prioritize those threats to public safety. And I think, as you mentioned, we're going to see more law enforcement, local, county, state, and federal law enforcement speaking out and actually wanting to become an ally with this new administration, working together to remove these threats from their states. That is priority number one. I don't see how anybody, again, and I keep repeating this, how anybody could be against that. So many horrific crimes, not just one, of course, that took place in the sub, but we've seen so many others. Laken Riley, Rachel Morin, Jocelyn Nongare, and many more that have taken place, many more victims that have taken place throughout this country that have been victimized by criminal illegal immigrants that should not be in the country at all.
We had another incident in New York City yesterday morning, by the way. Ashley Davis has a question for you.
Hi, Lieutenant. Actually, Homeland Security is near and dear to my heart. I did this under George W. Bush and think the border security is one of the major issues facing our country right now. And thank you for your service and everything that you're doing. My question is, do you think because of the cost, which I think that shouldn't even matter because of this is such an issue, right, but do you think that the president-elect does start putting these in phases in regards to, from what I understand, there's about 1 million illegal immigrants here that have either committed a crime or have exhausted the appeal process. And so you go after those 1 million first, and then you go to the second stage, and then, do you think that that's how they're going to handle it, or what are you hearing on the ground?
Well, I mean, obviously I can't speak for the administration, but I would, speaking from a law enforcement perspective, I would think that'd be the most strategic ways. You actually have this operation in phases, as you mentioned. Focus on the 1.4, 1.5 million that already have orders of removal that have received due process. Focus on locating gotaways. Focus on locating criminal gangs such as Tren de Aragua and other criminal threats. So working in phases strategically would actually be the better way, more effective way to actually handle this operation. But again, I can't speak for the administration, but I could see how we would handle that type of operation in Texas. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're focusing on those threats to public safety, focusing on human traffickers, criminal smugglers, and also locating criminal gangs. So I think, working with local law enforcement, county law enforcement, that'd be the best way moving forward, is in a strategic matter, to have it in phases and focus on those threats to public safety.
Lieutenant Christopher Olivarez, thank you so much, of course, for your work on this issue, and thank you for joining us. Merry Christmas, sir.